Hey folks, welcome back to another review with yours truly, Sam Healey. Today we're taking a look at Lincoln. This is a Martin Wallace game that is put out by PSC Games and Worthington. And it is, as the back of the box says, a new approach to the American Civil War. It is basically an epic style game. We're not talking about specific battles, individually speaking. We are talking about a grand scale game where you are trying to use your action cards to carry out your strategy. It's a card-driven game. So let's get down to the table. I'll show you how it works, and then we'll come back with a few thoughts after that. Let's get to it. So in a game of Lincoln, it is basically an area control game where the North is versus the South, and they are trying to win the war, as it were. You're going to be taking 2 actions on each of your turns, starting with the Union side, and those cards, the cards that you have in your hand, are going to be driving those actions and determining which actions you're going to be able to take. The way that you win the game is a number of different ways. First of all, if the Union player fails to score 2 victory points before he has to reshuffle his deck the first time, then the Confederate army automatically wins. Furthermore, if the Union army fails to score 5 victory points by the second time he needs to reshuffle his discard pile back into his deck, then the Confederate army automatically wins. Now, if the Union player exhausts his deck for a 3rd time, then they're going to check victory points, and if victory points have reached 12 for the Union side, then they have won. Otherwise, the Confederates have won. The Confederate player will win immediately if the Europe marker reaches the Confederate victory spot right here. Confederate player will also automatically win if he ever controls Washington. And then the Union player, controls Washington at the end of the Union player's turn. And then finally, the Union player will win automatically if at the end of the Confederate player's turn he controls both Vicksburg and Richmond. And that's how the games will end. Now, let's talk about what you're going to do on your turn. Now, on your turn, as I said earlier, it's going to be card-driven. You're going to have 2 actions, and the cards you have in your hand are going to determine what actions you're able to do. For example, if you have... Now, as you look at a card, it's going to have an anatomy here. You have a top row, and then you're also going to have a leadership row here, movement row here, and then other cards are going to have down here at the bottom actions, and there can be regular actions, there can be free actions, there can be other things like benefits, where if a certain condition is met, like for example this one right here, high ground, before leaders have been revealed, add 2 to your total if you are the defenders. So that's a card that you can play if you're the defender in a battle. So first of all, deploying a unit, it determines what kind of unit it is. So a level 1 unit, you don't have to actually pay anything, but other units, like for example a level 3 here, you're going to have to pay 2 cards from your hand, and then this card is actually going to go away out of the game. And that is also true for the level 2 infantries, if I can find one here. The number of cards that you have to play is different, but this one will also go away out of the game after you've played it. Level 1 infantry cards, though, however, will always be recycled back into your deck. You never get rid of them. You can also deploy units like a fort. Only the Confederates able to do that by paying 1 card from your hand and placing that out. But then again, this card is gone away if that happens. You can also deploy a European emissary as well. And when you deploy an emissary, you're basically going to be pulling this down into your favor. So if you're the Confederate and playing one of these, you're going to pull it down towards the Confederate victory spot. But if you're the North and you're playing one of these cards, you're going to be moving it back towards your direction. If you deploy a ship, then it's going to be moving the blockade marker back and forth. That's one of the things that we need to talk about. The Confederates always have 5 cards in their hand except for when the blockade starts to get down here into where the 4. This is actually going to determine how many cards the Confederates can have in their hand. The North always has 6 cards in their hand, regardless. But if you ever deploy a ship, like with this card right here, you're going to be moving this 1 in your favor. So if I am the South and I'm playing this, I'm going to be moving this back so that maybe my hand strength can go from 4 back up to 5, and so forth and so on. But if the North is going to be playing this one, then it's going to be moving it down the track and diminishing my hand size. You can also use a card to move. If it has this train symbol in it here, you can move units on the battlefields. And the way you do that is that you can use it to move. For example, let's say I had 2 guys here in Savannah. And if I play a move card, then I can take both of these guys and move them by 1 rail link. Oops. And if I play that, I can move both of these guys using 1 rail link up here to Richmond if I wanted to do that. Or I could just simply take this and move just one of them to any location on the board as long as it is connected by rail links. So if I wanted to, I could move this all the way up here to Front Royal, because I can trace a link to all of these different places. You can also use your cards for the actions that they have at the bottom. Some of them are free actions. I showed you some of the other ones before. Some were benefits that can be played as reactions. Other ones take a complete action to play them, so they would take one of your 2 actions during your turn. But others are free actions. So you get your 2 base actions, and then any of these other free actions that you would like to play. For example, Blockade Runner here just lets you draw 3 cards. And that can be in addition to the original 2 actions that you've already played. You can also discard cards out of your hand so that when you draw back up to your hand limit at the end of your turn, you can get a fresher hand look, or a fresher look of cards. And then finally, you can just pass and not do anything. You can do 1 action, and maybe you don't want to press the advance or anything like that. You can just pass, not do anything. Now, for the sake of exemplifying combat, let's say that the South has moved up into Harper's Ferry, and they are going to instigate a battle here. Whenever you move into an enemy-controlled territory, a battle is automatically instigated, so you don't have to do anything extra there. Now, the next thing that would happen is that the attacker would play a card face down. Now, this card is going to have, hopefully, a leadership value on it that they're going to be able to add to their strength in the battle. Now, at this point, the defender has the option to withdraw, and if they want to, they can withdraw back to a location, and this card would go away, having been played, and that would be the end of the battle. The Confederates would take control of this location, placing one of their flags to show that they have done so. But let's say that the Union player is not going to just withdraw. They're going to play their own battle card as well. And so that happens. Both are revealed. So we turn both of these over, and we take the number of leadership and add it to the number here. So that is 9 for the Confederates and only 6 for the Union. The highest strength total, of course, is the winner. So the Confederates have won this battle at Harper's Ferry, and casualties are now calculated. So the winner loses a number of counters that is equal to half of the total number of counters he has in the battle, rounded down. So in this particular case, this 3 would go away. Pretty hefty loss in the battle. Now, the loser would also lose half, rounded up, however, so they're going to also lose this as well. Now retreats are conducted. If the defender loses, he has to remove his army counters back to the next connected location, so they would have to come back here and retreat to Gettysburg, and then the Confederates would be able to take control of this location. Now, when they do that, they're going to get a point on the Europe track for every unit that had to be discarded. And then they're also going to be getting an extra point for taking over a blue location if it's a blue location. Now, they don't get that bonus if it's one of theirs and it's just a regular battle, so to speak. And so at the end of that battle, they would have been able to move this down twice, once for the unit that they destroyed and then once for taking over a blue location. Now, the Union also has an ability to move troops by ship. So they have a navy, which is what the blockade is out there representing. And if they can come from any of these port locations, like Washington is a port, Fort Monroe is a port, down here Savannah is a port, over there Louisiana is a port, they can move from one port by playing that naval card to any other port that is open on the board. So the Union does have a little bit more freedom of movement in the waters as compared to the Confederates. Additionally, you'll notice that each of the locations, well, some of the locations have victory points attributed to them in these purple hexes, and those are for the Union player only. They mean nothing to the Confederate player at all. Those are just used to determine, again, as we said earlier, those different game-ending conditions where the Union has to be scoring a certain number of victory points. So that's about that for Lincoln. Now, I of course, as usual, we didn't really show you everything that there is to show you in the game. There's a lot of minutia in some of the cards and the different actions that they can do, but I just wanted to give you a general idea of how the game flows. Your turn, you're just going to be playing 2 actions, using the cards out of your hand, and usually having to pay some of them to deploy units and that type of thing, moving your units around, conducting battles, and so forth and so on, trying to make sure that your opponent can't achieve one of their winning conditions while at the same time trying to achieve yours. And so hopefully you get the idea of how the game flows. Let's go ahead and get to my pros and cons. Now, the first pro of the game is going to be quite simply that it is a very simple game to teach, which is strange coming from such a juggernaut like Martin Wallace, and who has made so many heavy games in the past. This one is pretty light, especially by comparison. So I like the fact that it is a light, easy to teach game that still covers a time period that is very popular in a lot of people's minds, and very, I guess, drawing, I guess you could say. It's a dark period of our history, of course, because we're brothers fighting against brothers, but at the same time, there's also a lot of historical value to remembering and playing these kinds of games so that you can remember the past. I'm not trying to get too philosophical here. I'm just simply saying that it's pretty cool that a game that rehashes that part of American history, or any part of American history, and is easy to teach and easy to play, that's cool because it keeps these things in our minds and it helps us to remember our past. My second pro of the game is going to be that it is a card-driven system. I love card-driven systems. I don't know what it is. It's just always been one of my favorite mechanisms in a game because it gives me all of my options right there in front of me. And I don't have to think about, well, if I do that over there, or if I do this over here, and what if I want to place my worker over here and do that, and what if they take my spot? All of that thought processing is done away with. You have what you have to work with in your hand, and it's always available to you. Now, you may be using some of those cards, and you have to make choices. You can't use the cards for everything that's on them, so you have to be judicious in that way. But I love card-driven strategy games, and this one falls into that category soundly. Now, one of the things that I didn't go over, and it's actually one of the pros, so I have to go over it now. One of the things that I like about it is that it's kind of a deck almost deconstruction game, because when you're deploying some of those 2 and 3 units cards out of your hand, you're actually going to be getting rid of them. So your deck is going to be diminishing over time, but when it runs out the first time, you're going to take these Roman numeral cards and add them to your deck and then reshuffle it. And then when that deck runs out, you're going to take your level 2 or your second era cards and add them to the deck, and then reshuffle and so forth and so on. I really like that because it gives you the feel that you're deck building, but you're not really deck building. You're actually deconstructing your deck. And on top of that, along with the same pro, there's an asymmetry here because the Confederate deck is going to be getting weaker with each reshuffle. And by the way, they can continue reshuffling their deck as much as they possibly want to or have to, but the Union deck only gets 2 reshuffles. And then at the end of that third deck, if it's depleted, well, that's going to end the game. But the Union deck is actually getting more powerful over time with those different reshuffles, and the Confederate deck is actually getting weaker. So there is a very cool thematic flair that was built into that mechanism, and I really think that's cool. I think my final pro for the game is how simple combat is. It is not convoluted. You don't have to look up a bunch of charts to see, well, this person suffers this amount of attrition and this person over here has to go rations and he only gets half an apple between now and the next battle. None of that. It is very straightforward. You simply attack, play your battle card if you're the attacker. The defender gets to choose whether or not he's going to stand and fight or run. And it's just so simple, and that's refreshing because often games that cover this time period and are considered war games are not simple at all. They are very difficult to teach, and that really kind of secludes them to a certain part of society. This game is open, and anybody can sit down and play this. And I mean that because it is not that difficult at all. It'll take some time probably for some people, but generally speaking, this is a much more palatable game for this time period than many of the other ones that are out. My first con for the game is I think that the color schemes that were used for the Confederates and the Union were a little bit too close on the board. They kind of blend together and they don't look that dissimilar. It's not hard to tell them apart with a little bit of scrutiny, but you have to understand that while you're looking at it at the board, possibly in bad lighting, it's a little bit difficult to tell who is who on the board. You really have to kind of memorize where your units are, and so forth and so on. The names of the cities on the board, this is kind of along the same vein as the original con, kind of a graphic design error in my opinion. The names of the cities were very, very small. Additionally, they were underneath the counters that were in those locations for most of the game. So unless you just knew where all of these different cities were, it was kind of hard to remember that. And it does matter because you have to, for example, the Union player, one of their winning conditions is controlling both Vicksburg and Richmond. Well, Richmond is pretty easy to see, but Vicksburg is somewhere down there in the south. And unless you know where it is, it can be easy to get it mixed up. And that actually happened in one of the games that I played, is that the Union player mixed up where Vicksburg was. And so it's just one of those things. But really, that's about it for pros and cons. I enjoyed everything about the game. Those minor nitpicks that I was talking about in the cons were just that, very minor problems that I had with the game, and things that can be overcome, I guess, you could say, with multiple plays and so forth and so on. But I think I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. I really did enjoy the game. I thought it was a very good handling of this time frame because it kept it thematic. It kept it doing what you would expect from a game like this. You are controlling units and conducting battles, but it kept it easy. It kept it simple, and I like it when games do that. You cover the same time frame, same time period, but it's just more palatable to a greater number of people. It's one of the reasons why I like Memoir 44 so much, is because it is such an easier game to play than a lot of those war games that are out there. But it still does the same job in covering a period of history that we need to remember. So a 7 out of 10 for me from Lincoln. I really did enjoy it. Go give it a whirl on your own. And that's it from me. We'll see you guys and gals on the flip side. Take care now.